Hello, Bible readers. Today we're in Genesis 27, which means we're thinking about the blessing, which is something to try to wrap our heads around, and the role of deception within the blessing, and how deception matters, if at all, to the grand point of this chapter. Throughout Genesis, the transmission of the promise from generation to the next is always a crisis. You could call that the vertical crisis. But as Jacob and Esau relate to each other, we see it can also be a horizontal crisis within a generation. Chapter 25, verse 23 is still casting its shadow here in chapter 27, where it said, "The elder shall serve the younger." The blessing is treated almost like an object in this chapter. Jacob strives for it. He deceives in order to get it, but it makes him a fugitive. It becomes a source of anxiety and burden. The younger son never anticipated that. But Brueggemann talks about the blessing as though it has a mind of its own, mostly because it is driven by the will of God, which always achieves its purpose. The blessing will have its own way. One word about blessing here, which may be hard for us to grasp: Isaac and Rebekah, Esau and Jacob, they all behave as though this blessing matters more than anything that's visible. Like, we might ask, what's the big deal? A blessing doesn't seem like that big a deal. We might get caught up in who inherits a house, or who gets the car, or who gets the bank account. A blessing? Like, so what? But of course, this family, especially, being a family in existence because of God's promise, descendants of faith, the blessing combines all the primitive power of a spoken word for them. They know this blessing has power, a word that has real power to bless or curse, and a word once spoken that can't be unsaid. This blessing connects word to power in a real way, and also carries with it a special purpose for the recipient, almost like an eternal purpose, really. A life-changing claim is made through the word of blessing. So this blessing has power in a way we need to give it its due. We need to give it its credit. And it changes the one who is blessed. So it is a big deal, but in ways that aren't just, abstract or theoretical, like, I bless you. Think about it. This family in just a couple generations has come to know that without the power of the blessing, life has no fresh possibility, no new beginning. The unblessed, they know, are those left empty-handed with futures only they can shape, which means futures that are limited. Barrenness will end their future. Only the blessed can live a life beyond barrenness through the blessing, right? So for Esau, when he understands that he's lost the blessing that was rightfully his, he and his father Isaac both come to realize that his future has an ending. Barrenness will eventually catch up with him, and if not him, his descendants. Aren't we glad through Jesus we're included in this blessing? Now, you might think such a blessing as this would pass from generation to generation in some clean, predictable, maybe holy way. It is God's blessing after all. The most obvious way, of course, would be that the eldest son, primogeniture as it's called, the eldest son would automatically be blessed, maybe even with some ceremony. But Jacob snags it with trickery. The blessing from God is gotten not through some holy ceremony, but it's gotten by deception? Here's what Brueggemann says about this. This narrative exemplifies what is generally true of Genesis. This is not a spiritual treatise on morality. Genesis is, rather, a memory of how faith moves in the rawness of experience. We must leave it at that. We may want more from Genesis. We may want it to be a morality piece. It's not. And I appreciate this observation too. He says in the way the story is told, our sympathies, they run to Isaac and Esau, right? Like, Anybody that gets done with the story is kind of like, oh, poor Esau and Isaac, that was so sad. The scene where they realize what's been done cannot be undone is heartbreaking. Esau doesn't deserve to have the blessing stolen from him. Isaac doesn't deserve to be tricked by his scheming son. But as Brueggemann says, the story brings our sympathies to those who are beside the point, which is a skillful way of telling us readers that the blessing will work in spite of human character and quality, and in spite of our wishes that it go in a different direction. The blessing of God has its way whether we're attracted to or repelled by the object of the blessing. In other words, God works for Jacob without regard for our emotions about Jacob, because it's not about Jacob. The real purpose of God in this story is, and I talked about this a couple posts ago, the real purpose is to turn the world upside down, to show that the world's rules, that the way things happen in the world isn't the way things have to happen for God. Brueggemann calls it inversion. That's God's point here, showing that God can turn the world upside down whenever God wants. Having the elder serve the younger, that's upside down. Human conventions and the ways we bring order to things, God does not have to abide by them. And that's a huge lesson that we all need to believe and know. God evokes the conflict in this story. The conflict causes pain for Isaac and Esau. It causes shame for Rebekah and Jacob. But God doesn't shrink from that conflict because a holy purpose is underway. A point is being made, like it or not. Of course, many will not like it and not like Jacob because of it. That's why it's ironic that the one who tries so hard to get the blessing becomes a fugitive because of that very blessing. He's a fugitive from all the usual claims of family and good order. He's a fugitive from the well-ordered world of law, but he does still carry the blessing that allows for him to live in complete confidence that although his is a perilous path, it is also hopeful. I am one with my God. My God is with us, all of us, at all times and in all places.